Yeah.
But the question is, what would it take for the world to be better for good? And obviously, it's a giant question,
Hmm.
but you just end up looking out, especially these days, and you're like, seriously, like, what's it going to take?
Hmm.
And I'm like fairly ambitious in certain ways, lazy in a lot of other ways, but I like to ask
Yeah.
because nobody asks. And through asking as if no one else could give me the answer, I started to receive some stuff.
Hmm.
And now I'm at the point where I kind of want to share some stuff.
Yeah.
So if
Yeah,
that's something you'd want to do,
for sure.
I'd love to. Yeah.
Uh, my answer is, and we can talk about it, but like it's biased, but I think what would it
No,
take?
yeah, yeah. I definitely want to hear your answer.
Yeah, like what would it take for the world to be, what was the question again? What?
It's kind of loose in that way, but another way to word it is, what would it take for the world's problems to be resolved
Okay,
for good?
gotcha. Oh, for good. Okay. Um, so
I just say that to hold a high standard. You know what I
yeah,
mean?
yeah. My answer is communication, like uh,
Mm,
people talking to each other. So that's why I
mm-hmm.
say it's biased, but I feel like I have learned so much from people from sitting down with them and have like I deem myself an empathetic person to begin with, but I've become more empathetic through the project.
Mm-hmm.
And like
Mm-hmm.
an example that I'll use is like I met this kid in Cleveland, and he was talking about like 4 months earlier he was in jail because he had like was drinking and driving and he crashed his car into a fire hydrant and he fled the scene and like had to go back and get his car the next day and the cops took him in and stuff.
Oh,
Um,
that's a
yeah,
sour one.
but if you like go back into his backstory, he was born to like a single mother. His parents were never married. His mom was working like three jobs, so he had like memories of sleeping on factory floors while she worked. Um,
Holy moly. That's the
yeah,
thing is we never think about that, eh?
yeah,
Never ever. So easy to judge at the face.
and so he went. Um, like life went on and he went to college, but then his mom got sick and so he had to come home. And then she started to get better, but she had some complication where she had like an instance with her allergies where she was like choking on her mucus, and
Okay.
she actually like passed out and like didn't get oxygen to her brain for a certain period of time. And
Mm-hmm.
so they revived her, but she was in like a vegetative state. And so basically like what ultimately happened was he, being her only relative, like had to pull the plug on her, and like, he had to be the one to make that decision. And so he was probably like 25 years old maybe, and so that is what led him into the downward spiral of like drinking and like getting to the point where he's crashing his car. And so I think that a lot of times people look at other people's stories through the lens of their own. Like I
Mm.
think people would
Yeah, 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 yeah.
look at, and I've seen it with my project too, people will be like, how can you like afford to like just meet people for 4 years, but like they're thinking of like that they're still going out to eat and that they're doing buying new clothes and stuff. Like I don't do any of that stuff. And so
Straight up, dude.
yeah, and so I think like by talking to people and understanding their backstories you can understand like where they are in life and why they are a certain way. I think it goes for politics too. Like I like to use, like I'm an Eagles fan because I grew up in Philadelphia, and so I obviously don't like the Cowboys. But
Yeah, yeah.
I don't think if I was born and raised in Dallas that I would still be an Eagles fan. And so
Yeah.
like you're shaped
Yeah,
by
yeah, yeah, yeah.
the
Thank
environment
you. Yes.
around
I
you.
got you.
Yeah.
And that way when you do meet the Cowboys fan, you're like, ah,
Yeah.
love you, dude.
Yeah.
You're not like, fuck you.
Right.
You're an asshole, you know?
Yeah. And
Which
so
is much more fun.
I think if people were to talk to each other more, that they would build that empathy. And I don't know, like I plan to do some of that through my project. Like I don't know exactly how you would achieve that on a world basis, like how you would incentivize people. But
Hmm.
for me, like one of the things that I plan to do is have a first year university course where
Mm.
students are sitting one on one with each other and learning from each other's backgrounds as opposed to a textbook or a PowerPoint. And that
Hmm.
is like a lot of people ask me like, what are you going to do after you meet 10,000 people? I see myself like having this quaint life with like a wife and kids, being a professor, like that cool professor that had like sweet life experience that the students like get a lot of value out of his class. Um,
Minty, dude. I love that.
Yeah, so that's what I plan to do. But that how you achieve that on a greater scale, I don't know. Because I always say like I don't believe in world peace, but I do believe in world empathy. And I
Mm.
think the way that you get to empathy is through communication.
Hmm. Well, I mean, one thing is that I say to myself is like, if everyone did what you were doing or what I'm doing, how would the world look?
Hmm.
And just in terms of your answer, I feel like if everyone were to do what you're doing, uh, we'd have a good way of the way there.
Hmm.
You know what I mean? So I resonate deeply, and I think you hinted at something that I wanted to explore, which is seeing through the lens and just like that incapacity to see that.
Hmm.
I think it's probably the main detractor from the answer.
Yeah.
But one quote I've that's been golden to me that I found many years ago, but didn't really come back until recently, is by Henry David Thoreau. Uh, he said, "There are 1,000 hacking at the branches of evil to one who's hacking at the root."
Hmm.
And it's just such a beautiful guiding quote,
Hmm.
as well as just for the sake of clarity, because like the example I like to use is if Elon gave everyone an electric car tomorrow, we would still have problems in life.
Hmm.
It would be great, right? That would be awesome. Possibly if Trump were gone tomorrow, and this is more of a Vancouver thing,
Uh-huh.
uh, it would look better.
Yeah.
But I still don't believe that it would be what we want it to be,
Hmm.
right? So those are all branches, and branches are fine. But my point is, if we cut down every single branch there was
Hmm.
without addressing the root, it would grow back.
Right.
So I'm like, what the hell is the root?
Mm.
You know, I want to know because I don't want to waste my time,
Hmm.
first of all.
Yeah.
Right? And it's like, what is that? What is that? And I do have a certain answer. I don't know what it is, but I usually like to lead with a story,
Okay.
which is about 4 years ago when I was reading some of the more psychological, psychology oriented books. I was with my mom, and we have a very sassy, loving relationship. And she was like, I wouldn't do that if I were you, when I was doing something kind of foolish. And I was like, if you were me, you'd do the same thing because you'd only know what I know.
Uh-huh.
And I was being sassy,
Right.
and I ended up not doing that thing. But I was like, hey, what the hell? I had an insight, and I was like, oh my God. Like up until this point of my life, I lived as though if I were them, then I wouldn't have done that thing. Which means like if someone did something stupid, and in my head unconsciously I was like, I wouldn't do that, I have the grounds now to feel annoyed by them.
Hmm.
But in that moment I realized that's not the truth. If I had the experiences that they had, their DNA, their parents, their whatever, I literally wouldn't be able to go from my head and tell them what I think they should do.
Right.
I would only know what they know. But it seems to me today that everybody who hasn't had like some breakthrough lives that way. You know,
Hmm.
when someone does something stupid and they think that they would, no one thinks that like in their brain right in that moment, but you kind of feel that way,
Hmm.
then you're like, I'm annoyed. So we look at Trump again here in Vancouver a lot. Oh my God, you don't stop hearing about it.
Uh-huh.
And we're like, oh, I hate him. Oh, he's this, he's that, he's that. I'm like, first of all, stop feeding the guy, Jesus.
Yeah.
Um, Second of all that annoyance is because you don't realize if you were in his position, not if you were in his position, but if you were him, you do the same thing.
Mm.
And there's a distinction between if you were in his position, you would do something different. That's true.
Right.
That's of course true, right? You have your own knowledge. But if you were him or anybody else in their scenario, you wouldn't really have the choice to do anything else
Hmm.
because you're guided by their experiences. So that's the crux of it. Does that resonate?
Yeah, for sure. I yeah, it makes me think back like I sometimes wonder like how do you define a bad person?
Mm,
Like when
mm,
is a person bad versus they're just a product of their experiences and environment? And then like
absolutely.
at what point does someone have to be accountable for their own actions?
Yeah. I mean, those are two great questions. And I think they'll get swept over as we keep going here.
Hmm.
Maybe less so the second one. I like the second one a lot, but I hope we'll get there. So just to take that example a little bit further, because some people I tell who are maybe more in a pain state in their life, like, no, that's no, I don't accept that. So I go a little bit further and I say, okay, imagine a blue light and a red light. If these light were people, their whole lives they know that they're different, right? You're red, and they wouldn't be wrong, but they wouldn't be fully correct, because before that light hit the lens and became blue or red, they were just light, right? So they would be right. So if I take that analogy to people, I'm like, okay, you've got a hat, you've got longer hair, we're totally different. I can see that we're different. So when we look out, we see difference very easily, right? But recognizing the light, whatever that is, in a person ends up giving that foundation for empathy. You know? And even myself, like if I go look in the mirror and I look like uglier that day, or I don't look like my part of my light is dimmer, then I treat myself by that light, by the color of that light, rather than just saying, hey, you're just a piece of light. Treat yourself like that. And also when we see stupid people or bad, or like what you call bad people, we see the bad, the gross, ugly light that's coming, and we're like, oh, you're bad. But the thing is, when we see the light in them first, we give them a chance to actually move toward, like, be that.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. How would you define the human equivalent of light?
I don't like to go into like the words, but I think the most basic one is consciousness.
Okay.
Or awareness. You know, before you had a name, you were aware. Before you chose your style and everything, you were just aware. Right? So that light, I don't like to go too far into the words of it all, because I feel like it conveys. But yeah, I would say that the light to the lens is the consciousness to the person, and how they look and how they think and all that stuff.
Gotcha.
Just because it actually gives you a foundation to love and understand another person without having met them. Which you clearly already understand to some degree,
right.
You know? But a lot of us don't. And that's very evident in what we're seeing today. So this is a really cool part if you're ready to get your mind blown.
Yeah.
So usually I get people to write this out, but for the sake of this, we'll just use the screen.
Okay.
So imagine 4 quadrants.
Okay.
And right in the middle, we have a point. That's the middle.
Okay.
So you get the point. The point is, if I were you, I would do the same thing. And if you were me, you'd do the same thing. And I usually don't go through with the point until someone actually resonates with that. Because if I don't, and they don't resonate, or they're like, yeah, no, I get it, and they were lying or whatever, then it won't make any sense. So this screen, I usually say paper, describes a set of our experiences. So on the top half, we have positive experiences. And on the bottom half, we have negative experiences. Now on the right side, or your left or whatever, I'll just use this. That's experiences that the me has created, that I've created. So I usually tell people to write me in quotations. So like that's just me in my conception and you in your conception. And then obviously on the other side, we have others or you in quotations. So that's you and everybody else in my perspective, and me and everybody else in your perspective.
Okay.
So you got positive experiences that I've created, negative experiences I've created, positive experiences others have created, and negative experiences others have created. So we're going to go through each one as if we didn't understand the point.
Okay.
And see what happens. And then we'll see what happens once we do get the point.
Okay.
And it's pretty cool. So with this one, it's positive experiences that I've created.
Okay.
So say I shoot a basket and goes in, and in my head, I unconsciously go like, no one else would have done that. You're pretty fucking awesome. What happens when I do that and I feel like no one else could have done that? Pride. Right? It gives a foundation for pride. Because you're like, yeah. And then it's quite an addictive feeling. So you want to like do other things that nobody else has done, or that you feel like nobody else could do. And you want to push yourself. And to some degree, that's totally natural. Right? That's fine. But it ends up being this, we've seen so many power hungry, success addicted people. you know, who just can't stop because they just need they need more.
Mm-hmm.
And it also makes you that bad team member because you just start, you know, I'm the one who does it.
Right.
I'm the one who shot the shot. But now what happens if I realize that anybody else, given the experience that I've had, would have done the same thing, including my dog or a homeless person or Hitler,
Mm-hmm.
whatever, whoever it is. What happens? That pride ends up just vanishing
Mm-hmm.
because you shoot the basket, and this is important to say, it still feels good, right? You shot the basket. Your brain will tell you,
Mm-hmm.
wow, nice, I did it. Whatever the task is, right? You're like, I did it. Nice job. But there's no place, you don't go, it was only me, only I could have done that.
Mm-hmm.
There's no place for pride to take root, basically, right? And and thus humility appears, but you didn't practice the humility, right? Like if I like to say we live in a pseudo conscious
Okay.
society because everyone's nice, but the world still sucks.
Mm-hmm.
But everyone's nice. So what the heck's going on? Like a common example of false humility is like if you're prideful today, everyone just knows you're a dick,
Mm-hmm.
right? But if I open the door for the hot girl that's coming through, I'm like, yeah, you saw me open the door. I'm
Uh-huh.
a gentleman. That's not humility, right? That's me trying to be humble.
Mm-hmm.
But if I genuinely see you like struggling towards a door where I just want to actually open the door for you, and I don't even, and you realize that I don't even realize what I'm
Mm-hmm.
doing, then you're like, man, that was humble. Like the humble person has no clue that they're being humble. They're just doing the good thing because they actually think it's just the normal thing to do.
Mm-hmm.
You know? So that's the first quadrant.
Okay.
Make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Nice. Any questions?
No, I think I'm good. I'm gonna let it all come together.
Cool. Yeah. Just jut in anytime you'd
Okay.
like. Just to let you know. Okay, let's go to positive experiences in the others. So when someone does something awesome and you feel like you couldn't do that, if you were them, you have jealousy. Like I mentioned Gary Vee earlier, when I was doing that startup, I would watch him on videos and I didn't have that level of confidence. And unconsciously I would watch him and go, feel jealousy and go, man, if I were him, I wouldn't be able to do that.
Mm-hmm.
Ah. But realizing if you had the same practice, the same hours, the same whatever, then you would also be able to show up with that level of whatever
Mm-hmm.
and also make it your own. Like you're not just going to copy somebody. Then that jealousy ends up turning into potential. And you realize everything that you're jealous about is just something that you're meant to integrate into your character.
Mm-hmm.
Because you won't feel jealous over something that's not meant for you.
Right.
You know? Like if you don't feel jealousy over some cool thing, then just it's
Mm-hmm.
whatever. But when you feel it, recognizing this, you're like, oh, I got to practice that shit.
Mm-hmm.
You know? And is that the point here? Yeah. So this is a new one for me,
Okay.
but it's pretty important. Like when I imagine a kid understanding this, when they're in class, they're in art class, say,
Mm-hmm.
and they look to the right and they see a beautiful thing, right? And they're like, shit, I must not be an artist. Right? And that's not understanding the point. Understanding the point, they would go, hey, how did you do that breaststroke?
Mm-hmm.
I want to be able to do that. And then next class they go to math. Someone comes out with an A+, they've got like a B, and they're like, ugh, I'm only all right at math.
Mm-hmm.
But it's like, hey, how did you know? If they understood, they would say, how did you get that? And they would feel no separation from the ability to grab those skills.
Right.
But we grow up going, oh shit, he's better, she's better. Okay, I'll do this thing. Versus, okay, I can always upgrade my art skills, always upgrade my science skills, always upgrade my entrepreneurial skills, whatever it might be.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a new one for me, but I think it's really
Yeah.
important. So that's that quadrant.
Okay.
Basically, your jealousy is actually your potential. It just feels that prick at the start.
Yeah.
And final point there is, no matter what you do, you're never going to be faster than Usain Bolt.
Mm-hmm.
He's kind of found his thing, right? But if you practice the same way that Usain Bolt does, you'll be faster than 99% of people.
Mm-hmm.
right? So it's still important to find your
Right.
thing, but it's just to show the potential is absolutely
Right.
there. Like, and I guarantee you, he was jealous of all the other fast runners more than you and I were.
Hmm. Yeah.
Right? Moving on. The third one, just going around
Yeah.
counterclockwise. So here, I'm just looking at my board over
Okay.
there. So here
Hmm.
is negative experiences that others have created. And I touched on this with the stupidity thing earlier, but like when someone does something that annoys us, that's stupid, that's whatever, and we feel like someone cuts you off in
Hmm.
traffic, something like that, and you feel like I wouldn't do that if I were them, then you have intolerance, you have impatience, and you have the seed or the root of hatred, right? Because if that continues, it just gets worse and worse and worse and
Hmm.
worse. But when you understand the point and you see, oh, I would be doing the same thing, you have patience, right? And not a patience you can practice, a patience that comes from
Hmm.
understanding. And that's really important because today we think you can practice all these things, this humility potential, but it's like, it's more a matter of understanding the way I see it now than it is like, I'm going to practice my humility and patience
Hmm.
today. Because if I understand where you're coming from, I will have the patience to deal with that.
Right.
And again, just like the basket feels good, someone cutting you off or someone saying an ignorant thing doesn't mean you just tolerate it. It means you're patient enough to say, okay, how do I deal with this?
Hmm.
Right? Because back to the pseudo conscious society, we're very tolerant. If someone does something evil or ignorant in front of us, it's very easy to go, oh, I'll tolerate it. I'm a nice person.
Hmm.
But if you tolerate evil or ignorance, what does that make you? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I'm not calling anybody
Right.
evil, but it's just like back to the bully thing. It's like
Like.
if you watch the kid get
Hmm.
bullied, whose side are you
Yeah.
on?
It's like the indifference of good men. Type.
Well, that's where all the fault is, right? There's only a few really bad people.
Mm.
The fault isn't us watching the show.
Mm.
It's like, oh, the Trump show. Ah, he's the
Hmm.
worst. But I'm not going to do anything about
Hmm.
it. You know? Something I tweeted recently was like, we don't need 10,000 super geniuses. We need each person to just understand their responsibility, their basic
Hmm.
responsibility. Something like that. It wasn't
Right.
those
Right.
words, but that's all I can remember now. Okay, ready for the last
Hmm.
one? It's often the hardest for most people just because we like to have a pity party for ourselves and we have very special pains that no one else could possibly ever
Hmm.
rectify. Uh, so when I do something that I'm seriously not proud of, that I don't like, that I know is wrong, and I feel that no one else would have done that in my scenario, I have
Hmm.
shame, right? And it fucking sucks. It feels terrible because you're like, I could have made the right choice. Someone else would have made the right choice, and we accumulate this shame over our
Hmm.
lives, right? Made the wrong decision, made the wrong decision. And then when we go out to go do things, we're so wary of that shame and sensitive to it that we'd rather make no decision than make the wrong
Hmm.
decision. Because like one little wrong decision, it like hints back to that big pile of shame that you
Hmm.
have, right? And people just end up being paralyzed almost their whole lives sometimes. To certain degrees, they just will live in this certain
Hmm.
bubble of like the decisions are made for me. It's fine. But that's, you feel scared in that life. I lived that life for a long time. God
Hmm.
damn, this sucks, you know. But I didn't know how to get out. But anyways, when you realize, and this is the hardest part for most people, is when you realize that anyone else would have done the same thing as you in that
Hmm.
scenario, you have self forgiveness, right? You can forgive yourself not by choice, right? If I forgive you by choice, then I don't actually forgive
Okay.
you, right? If I understand why you did that thing, I will have to
Hmm.
forgive you. Because if I'm like, I'll forgive you, but remember
Yeah.
that, that's not forgiveness. That's me trying to get a betting token for
Hmm.
later, for when I mess up, right? So when I actually understand that, all that stuff where I felt like I made that mistake, again, it doesn't take away the mistake. You know it was
Hmm.
wrong, and it will never change that, right? But it means you can forgive yourself for it. It means that you realize there's no one to blame.
Right.
in that scenario, though you had choices, life just took you down that route and probably taught you a lesson that you needed to learn. Right? So there was one other extension of that. Yeah, it kind of goes back to people having a special pain that no one can resolve. All of our pain is different, right? Like my story is different than yours, and I could hold on to that my whole life. And the truth is, in healing, no one could ever heal you because you can always say in your head, "Well, mine's different than yours," right? So it's like this thing we could never let go of if we didn't want to, which is what we are doing. But when you see that, like, that pain was coming from a misunderstood place, you can begin to let go of it. And understanding these things, a lot of things can just drop off. Because you're like, okay, that prideful thing, okay, anyone would have done that, whatever. Oh, the thing I'm jealous over, oh yeah, that's my potential, whatever. But there's some things that are so big in our lives, so shameful, or I hate this guy so much, or I feel so awesome about what I did, that like it's like, oh, that was one of the things about pride is pride lets you upgrade your self-image relative to other people, and then you end up competing with everybody in this kind of way that ends up making them feel like shit, even if they're like a regular person. So that's one other toxic part of that. But it just, well, it was in my brain. But it's just to say that there's also bigger moments that we have to consciously go through. Like someone can understand this or realize this and still have to go, okay, there was that time where I went through that thing and I felt really bad. And I need to go through and see that, okay, anyone would have done that. Martin Luther King would have done it. Jesus would have done it. My dog would have done it. And once you really see that, if you can really see that, then it actually just lifts off. Right? And that's really the most beautiful thing to me.
Nice.
Because it's not like, yeah, I actually don't know where to go with that, but
yeah,
it is. So that's the quadrants. There's a tiny bit more to go. Any questions?
No, I'm good. I follow.
Nice.
I have a question. I'll ask it at the end though, because I want to wait.
Nice. Yeah, I don't have too much more. So before people understand this, and people have understood this way before I said it, I'm just saying it in my own words, right? That's also needs to be said. Like it's been here for a long time. Before people understand this, there's this constant conflict between like how much I should give to others and how much I should give to myself, how selfish and how selfless I should be. But through this understanding, I've recognized that it's actually, if you pour the water into your cup, there's a point at which it just ends up pouring to everybody else. And if you genuinely make yourself happy, you get to a point where you're like, shit, I just want to share this. You just sit there in happiness and you're like, okay, I got to go out now. You know, and it sounds like you've gotten there to a degree yourself, right? You're like, okay, let's go. But we often think, okay, I got to spend some energy into my cup, and then I'm going to go pour it into somebody else's cup, which is going to make my cup less. And then this constant conflict and a waste of energy between, right? And then when we try to pour in someone else's cup, we can only ever, when ours isn't full and overflowing, we can only give them motivation. We can make them feel good in that moment, but then later they'll feel empty again. Right? Because then they look back at you and your cup's still like not full. And they're like, is this real? Like, what's going on? But when your cup is overflowing, you just inspire people and you feel inspired yourself. And that's just contagious. It's not that you're necessarily inspiring them. It's just like, oh, I want to be in an overflowing cup too. Whatever the hell that means. But I like that analogy. So next point here is really understanding this. I like this analogy. Understanding this the same way that you understand the sun is in the sky. Because people tend to choose to think love is like something I can just choose and it's there if I want it to be or whatever. But for me, I'm like, oh, it's just there. I get this. The sun's in the sky. This is truth to me. right? And if that's the case, you can't purposely harm somebody else, because when you try to do that, it hurts
Mm-hmm.
you, right? Like, if I try to hurt somebody knowing this because I feel that connection between them, it doesn't work because I feel the
Mm-hmm.
pain. What that also means is that I only have incentive to help them, because then I'll feel good. I know the better that other people do, the better I'll eventually do as well, right? And the more pain that I cause in other people, the more I'm bringing the whole thing down, because it's just going to make a shittier world for me. Makes
Mm-hmm.
sense? So what that means is we can only make the right mistakes. Like, you can still fall, you can still trip, right? I can still accidentally hurt you. If we're walking and I literally trip on you, I could hurt you, but I can't do it on purpose. And that what that means is I can only make the right mistakes. I won't make the mistakes I make. Everyone's going to make mistakes. My mom liked this yesterday. Mistakes. Everyone will make a mistake, right? That's inevitable, and it'll always
Mm-hmm.
happen. But it'll be the right one understanding this. Not understanding this, every mistake you make will be probably wrong, and even the right things you do will be wrong. Because you'll do some successful thing, but then you'll go hoard it off into a corner. Does
Mm-hmm.
that make sense? And it's really a nice thing to know that you're going to make the right mistakes, because then it's like, okay, I can make some decisions
Right.
now, and I'm willing to fall on my face because I know it's like the baby who's learning how to walk. He doesn't like trip and then go, I'm a worthless
Mm-hmm.
baby. He's like, okay, the leg felt that way. Yeah, okay, that was good.
Yeah.
You know, it's just like that. Um, so that's the whole point there. Now let's just get back to the
Okay.
root, the quote, and I'll say the quote again just for sake of
Sure.
having it here. There are 1,000 hacking at the branches of evil to one who's hacking at the root. And I was using the example of, like, if everyone had an electric car, whatever. And those things are, by definition here, branch answers. But I feel this one to be the root answer, and I think it's the same thing as you were hinting at earlier, which is if everyone unrealistically, if everyone understood this today, tomorrow, I think everything would change. And not in that, boom, the problems will be resolved, but in that, I see the problems that I am seeing, the branches that I'm seeing are my problems to solve. Right? Today we see the problems and we're like, someone's going to get it. Bystander effect, someone's going to get it. But the other thing that happens is your life stops becoming a problem. Because we walk around today like as if our life is a problem. Because it essentially is that way. Right? And then what happens when your life is a problem? You walk around and you create problems everywhere you go. Like, you go through the struggles of, what am I going to eat, or what's this, or like, that person's pissing me off, and all that. So literally everyone's walking around as a problem, creating problems everywhere, right? But understanding this, life becomes a challenge, and a challenge is just a problem you like to have, right? Like, the challenge of life doesn't end because you get this. You're still going to die. You still have all this time ahead of you, and you're like, oh my God, I'm going to die. What am I going to do? How do I best spend my time? But that's now a nice challenge to have. Like, okay, that's all I got. Let's do it. And then when everyone's walking around like it's a challenge or it's like a game, that's a world that's much better. You know what I mean? And it's just to say, like I said, it doesn't resolve the problems tomorrow, but it eventually over time, everyone goes, solve that. And that's why I like to use the wording resolve, to resolve the problem, to end it. So you see, like, plastics or whatever, you go, we need to make this circular. We need to make it sustainable so that when we build something, the whole process is done. It's not going to create any more waste. Just for an example there. Problems, challenges. Okay, so the very last piece, and then we'll get into questions, is, so, like, I say, okay, that's the answer. That's the answer for me now. But, like, you and I just talked about it. And okay, cool. So here's another unrealistic, never going to happen example. But the thing is, when the brain doesn't see a finish line, and he's still realizing this. It's like, if I don't see a finish line, it's like, whatever. This is cool to know. That's awesome. But like, it's not gonna happen. So I might as well just like live my freaking life and
Mm-hmm.
just go. And that's totally fair. But if you can see a finish line, then you're like, oh, yeah, maybe it's not
Mm-hmm.
so bad, right? So let's say spontaneously someone understands this today, and today they're like, I'm gonna talk about this with two people today in a way that causes them to tell two people tomorrow. Again, this is
Mm-hmm.
not going to happen. This is
Right.
just an example. But if that chain were to continue, for me today, two people tomorrow, to tell two people the next day, so you can see
Mm-hmm.
like 2, 4, 6, 8, you know how that goes. Um, how long do you think it would take to cover the whole planet if we just did that consistently, theoretically, perfectly?
Um, I want to say like like a month and a half.
Yeah, that's really close, actually. I was like doing the month calculation because I know it
Okay.
in days. It's 40
Okay.
days. 40 days. That's
Mm-hmm.
crazy. When I was took my calculator, I was like, what the hell? And again, that's not going to happen. But that's a
Mm-hmm.
finish line, 40 years away. And that goes back to the question: is what's going to resolve the problems for good? It's not just going to solve like the problems we're seeing. It means that the kids that come in the next generation, we hand this to them, and they go, "Oh, I can do anything
Mm-hmm.
I want." Oh, and that was what I meant to say about the other thing is you can't tell a kid he's stupid if he knows this because he'll go, "Ha ha, I know that it's an unshakable
Mm-hmm.
power." Right? Because he goes, no, I know I could do that if I were you. You can't tell me I'm stupid. Does that make sense? And that's
Mm-hmm.
freaking awesome. But back to the example is, so if people were to tell two people today, that's kind of the chain that would go
Mm-hmm.
off, as I see it. And again, that's unrealistic because essentially what I could be saying here is love is the answer. We're
Mm-hmm.
all one, right? But if everyone said that today, the world would look almost no different tomorrow because those are
Mm-hmm.
words. It's not understanding, right? Like it is that's what I would summate the answer to
Mm-hmm.
be, but saying that is not nearly enough. It has to be through understanding. So if someone took a uh, a pamphlet of what I had and went up to people's doors and hey, you know this? It would
Mm-hmm.
not work, right? Because someone has to understand that and put it in their own words, right? One of the quotes, another quote I really really love, and I don't know who said it is. I use not only all the brains that I have, but all that I can
Mm-hmm.
borrow. And it's just to say that things that work. You shouldn't look at somebody else's stuff and go, "Oh, his was really good, but I can't use that." You still want to, like Bruce Lee said, look at
Mm-hmm.
everything, take what works for you, discard what doesn't, and then add what is
Mm-hmm.
uniquely your own. Everyone's message is different, and it needs to be different for you to feel authentic in
Right.
giving it, right? But it's still essentially the same thing. It should be, and if it's not, then we can't come to a
Mm-hmm.
common truth, right? So that's what I like to call the vital answer. You could do your entire life spiritual work by having two hard conversations. And everybody knows two people that they're close enough to have a difficult
Mm-hmm.
conversation with. You know what I mean? Like, I kind of have this a little bit down pat, but I also struggled for 2, 3 years trying to find the words and even what the heck was for more years than
Mm-hmm.
that, trying to figure out how to say this stuff and even what it was in the first place, right? So that's the vital answer. Is if two people told two people perfectly, we'd be done in
Mm-hmm.
40 days in this lifetime, which is like something most of us would never ever dream
Mm-hmm.
of, ever at all, right? The creative answer is understanding this. Everything you do, art, business, literally anything, science, will give off a certain level of inspiration. Walking down the street, you're like, eh, how's it going? You're not always like
Mm-hmm.
pumped up, of course, but recognizing, seeing yourself in another person, you're like, hey, you want to smile, you want to put it out there, So there's like the one, this is how you do it. The other one's just like, and the other one's the world that you'd like to live in afterwards, where everyone feels creative in
Mm-hmm.
that way. But one caveat, and the final thing I'll say, I'm closing my book now, is we're so success oriented, and that's what we're taught in school, is how to be successful. Essentially, that's what they're trying to get us to do. But when it comes to spiritual growth, or just, I don't like those words, just being a person, a human being, we try to do the same thing. And when you care about success a lot, as you and I do, a bad day is a really bad day, right? If you can't get yourself up that day, it's like, fuck, what do I do? I feel hopeless, blah, blah, blah. And then a good day is like ecstatic, addictive, oh my God, I'm king of the freaking world, you know, which is like not so healthy. But also, when we go through the bad day, we can take it as a reason to stop, because it's like, ugh, this is
Mm-hmm.
hopeless. But recognizing your humanity, your love, your whatever the heck it is, I don't like to use a word for it because it's wordless, but you realize there are good days and bad days. You realize there's times where you're more motivated and times where you're less motivated. And that never affects you just speaking out about what you find
Mm-hmm.
to be true, you know? And that's the last thing, is like, some people that I'm trying to talk to now, they think I'm trying to get them on something, but I'm never going to ask anybody to do anything. I'm not going to say, hey, go tell 2 people tomorrow, because if something like this is understood, you'll share it in your own way,
Mm-hmm.
however it goes, you know? And something like this could never, ever happen through one person. Like the Jesus, the
Mm-hmm.
whatever thing, that would never happen, because the only way we could ever save the world is if everyone in their own heart could be like, we did it.
Mm-hmm.
I did it. If we were all walking around like, oh, he did it, that would
Right.
never work. That wouldn't be the saved world in the first place.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So yeah, I mean, that's really
Okay.
all I got. Reflections, questions. I'm
Yeah.
excited to hear it.
Just a heads up, I have to run in like 5 minutes. I feel like dying.
Yeah, I saw
Yeah,
the time
but
getting.
yeah, it's interesting. I think a lot, like, from what I gather, it's like an understanding and a acceptance almost flips the things from like pride to humble, jealousy to potential.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and yeah, I'm very like, when I think about things, I'm like, what are, because I believe anyone can do anything that they want in life too. Like, same thing that you were saying. Like, if you have the
Absolutely.
roadmap, and for me, the roadmap is
Mm-hmm.
like actions. And for you, you put it into, you
Mm-hmm.
tell 2 people. Um, um,
Mm-hmm.
but I'm like, there's a depth to it too. Like, how do you make 2 people understand? Because, like you said, telling 2 people
Yeah.
doesn't just work. It's like, so I feel like there's like
Yeah.
a whole roadmap from like you understanding to you telling the next person, and what does that roadmap look like, so that they actually understand. And then if they do understand that like someone does something stupid, are they, their understanding of it, but does it change the fact that it would happen in the first place?
Mm. Yeah. So with that,
Mm-hmm.
no. Like, we like to say there's an arbitrary moment where someone grows up and they should know
Right.
everything that we know. People are always going to, like I said, people are always going to make mistakes. People are always going to do something stupid relative to
Mm-hmm.
what you know. Like, the baby tripping is not stupid. You just think it is because you
Right.
know how to walk. Right? So everyone's going to be, it's about the tolerance
Mm-hmm.
to that. Because when we can all tolerate stupidity, that's the world we want to
Right.
live in. And it's not even really stupidity, it's just relative to what you
Right.
know. Right? And I guess the final point there is, everyone always wants to be handed a script or roadmap or whatever, but it's only when you actually like ask yourself, how can I connect to this to 2 people, or
Mm-hmm.
to whoever, to one person, that you'll ever actually find their answer. Like, if I was just like, hey, like, what's the
Mm-hmm.
answer, I never would have found the words
Right.
that I found today. I had to go, oh my God, no one's ever going to tell me the answer. That's
Mm-hmm.
horrifying. Now that I know that, what the hell is the answer? How am I going to connect
Right.
this to people? Like I can only say it in a way that some
Hmm.
people understand. But if I connected to somebody that understands, they'll connect to someone. Maybe they'll connect to someone who
Hmm.
I can't. Maybe someone who's more receptive to like artistic, less like this is hyper
Right.
logical, very direct, right? Someone else might just need to feel the love and go and just have that
Hmm.
happen over time. Everyone has their own language or whatever, but it just comes back to how do I? No one else is going to do it. The
Hmm.
bystander effect, no one else is going to do it. How am I going to do this? How am I going to connect two people to this? Because understanding that this actually is the answer, there's nowhere else to go. Like I can go give you like those are you. There's still the creative answers that you can do. I can go give you flowers, but it's for me. It was nice to know. Oh my God, there is a way
Hmm.
out of this hell. Not that I live in hell. I live in my life is really, really
Right.
amazing, honestly. But I look out and I'm like, fuck, I
Hmm.
feel bad. How do I give,
Yeah.
an answer? So,
Yeah.
yeah.
I feel like there's like the yin and yang type thing where it's like
Yes.
there will always be a balance. And yeah, I don't know why there will be a balance, or why some people are in the good side and people are in the bad side. Um, but I do believe that the world like is absolute value good, like even if there are bad parts to it.
Mm-hmm. Well, I like to say life is good. The world is
Mm-hmm.
not good. And the one caveat on the bad people thing is there's no bad people. There's only
Mm-hmm.
people in pain.
Mm-hmm.
And if you were them, you'd feel that pain. So understanding that, you can really connect. There's literally no such
Mm-hmm.
thing as a bad person. There's just someone. The world is
Mm-hmm.
hard, man. Like we came from war. We came from being monkeys. We came from like actually like if I'm in a tribe and I'm a monkey and I'm growing up or I'm um like an early person and my family's here and I don't know who's going on over there. I
Mm-hmm.
will kill them
Right.
to protect my family. And that's where we've come from. That level of pain and fear, and we need
Mm-hmm.
to understand that. Nowadays, we finally have the opportunity. We've gotten to a place where we can
Mm-hmm.
not do that, right? But understanding that that's where we've come from is a good foundation for understanding that there is no such thing as a bad person. There's just a person that's in pain and confused, and also wants to fix things. Like every bad person still thinks they're trying to do
Mm-hmm.
something right. They're just misconstrued by so many
Right.
forces of life. Like you were saying with the guy, right? Like his story. As soon as you hear the story, you're like, oh, okay, maybe if that happened to me, I'd
Mm-hmm.
drive drunk too. Oh my God,
Right.
you know? So I really believe that.
Yeah. No, I see it.
There's always,
I see
you
that.
go,
Yeah,
sorry.
I can understand. Um, yeah, and it's very like I don't know. I enjoy these types of conversations, especially as I get older, because you think about more about life and like the
Hmm.
purpose and where it even came from.
Absolutely. No, it's a wonderful
Yeah.
space getting to those
Um,
questions.
I I want to tell you about it before you jump off because I feel like you probably already know about it, but if not, do you know the YouTube channel Kurzestat?
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
that
I've been following her for a long
reminds
time. They're
me of
amazing.
those conversation. This conversation reminds me of that channel.
Oh, I'd love it if they made a video around this stuff. That'd be crazy because they've got much
Mhm.
more reach than
Yeah.
me. But one thing that's coming to mind that I now have to say is people often say that's unrealistic. And the funny part about that is if everyone says that's unrealistic, then they
Mhm.
create that reality. If everyone would say that's realistic, I'll do it today, then that would be what's happening
Right.
realistically right now. And that's something that I feel is really important to say because it's so easy to hear the big thing and go, "Oh, well,
Hmm.
that's unrealistic." And it's like that's true, but you're making it
Right.
that way, not me. If everyone were to say, "Okay, this is a basic truth. This isn't anything grand or high or whatever. It's realistic. I'm going
Right.
to go tell whatever. I'm going to go find a way to say it my way." Then it would be
Hmm.
perfectly realistic. And that
Nice.
just needs to be said.
I
Hey man, I really, really honestly appreciate
Yeah.
everything you're doing. It's inspiring to watch your journey, and I'm so happy to
Thank
be
you,
able to
man.
connect and have a friendship
Yeah.
going forward.
I
It's great to
appreciate
connect with you, man.
you reaching out, answering the story, connecting, sharing your thoughts and ideas with me. It's fun to just like sit and think about some of these bigger issues. So thank you for taking that approach to our hour together. Yeah, and I appreciate it, man. It's good to connect with you.
Yeah, and hopefully some other time we can go over some other bigger the big meaning of
Yeah,
life questions too.
absolutely. And also just logistically for now, you know, have a picture
Mhm.
with everyone. The
Oh
way that
yeah,
I
yep, yep,
do
yep.
that is once we hop off the call, if you can snap like a selfie on your phone and then just DM it to
Ah,
me
yep.
in the next couple of minutes, I'm going to take one here and I'll put us
Hmm.
next to each other. All
Epic,
right,
dude. I
Josh.
love
It's
it.
good talking to you, man. Have a good rest of your day. Yeah,
Really good
you
to meet you,
too.
Rob.
You
You
too,
too.
man.
Have a powerful
Take
day.
care.
Peace, bro.